Jack never thought his small home on the quiet side of the colony planet would be the center of the galaxy's attention. He sat beside the bed. Holding the tiny hand of his newborn child, the baby's fingers were small and warm, gripping his finger with surprising strength. Beside him, Lyra, his wife, lay tired but smiling weakly, her silver hair falling over her face. Her eyes, deep violet and full of emotion, stayed fixed on the child. It was a moment that should have been only joy, only love, only peace. But even in that quiet room, Jack felt an unease. Lyra's smile faded as she looked at him. "She's here," she whispered, "the one the stars warned about." Jack frowned, not understanding. He brushed his thumb over the baby's soft cheek. "She?" he asked, confused. Lyra nodded, her voice low, almost trembling. "The prophecy," she said. "They've been searching for her for centuries." Jack almost laughed, thinking it was just exhaustion speaking. But Lyra's serious eyes stopped. "This child," she continued, "is the stellar heir." Jack had heard the old alien stories before. They spoke of a child born from two worlds, one human. One alien who would either unite the galaxy or tear it apart, he always thought. It was just myth, something elders told to make people believe in peace. But Lyra was not someone who believed in harmless stories. She had lived through wars. She had seen empires fall. Her people's archives held records of the prophecy going back thousands of years. And now she was telling him their daughter was the one. Before Jack could respond, a strange sound echoed outside, a deep, distant hum. Like an engine too large to belong to anything civilian, Lyra's eyes darted to the window. Jack stood quickly, moving to check the night sky above there. Settlements shimmered with faint lights. At first, he thought they were just stars. Then he realized they were moving. Ships dark and fast slipping into the planet's atmosphere without any landing beacons. Jack felt a cold knot in his chest. Lyra sat up despite her exhaustion. "They already know," she said. "They already felt her arrival." Jack turned back to her. "Who?" he demanded. Lyra's voice was grim. "Everyone who wants her power, and everyone who fears it." The baby stirred in Jack's arms, letting out a small cry. Her cry was soft but carried a strange tone. It was almost musical, like a note that didn't belong to human voices. Lyra's eyes softened, but her fear didn't fade. "She will be hunted," she said, "by those who want to use her. And those who want to destroy her." Jack sat back down, the weight of his daughter heavier than any burden he had ever carried. He thought of his old life back on Earth, life of training, missions, and fighting other men. That was nothing compared to what he faced now. This wasn't a battle he could win with bullets alone. This was something far bigger. Hours passed slowly. Lyra drifted in and out of sleep. Jack stayed awake, listening to every sound outside. The hum of alien ships still lingered in the distance. He knew they were watching, waiting. The settlement was quiet, but he felt eyes on them. Every instinct told him trouble was coming. Soon, at dawn, the first message came. It wasn't sent to his home, but broadcast over the colony's comm network. A warning: residents of Sector 7. A voice said, "Remain indoors until further notice." Jack knew the voice had belonged to the colony governor. The tone was too calm, too careful. It was the kind of voice used when something dangerous was already inside the gates. Lyra was already on her feet, holding their daughter close. "We can't stay here," she said. "If they come, the house won't protect us." Jack wanted to argue, but deep down he knew she was right. He grabbed a small pack, stuffing in food, water, and a few tools. He slipped his old sidearm into the holster at his waist. It felt strange carrying it again in what was supposed to be a peaceful life, but peace had ended the moment their daughter was born. Before they left, Jack paused and looked around the room. It had been their home for years. The walls were lined. with pictures of quiet days, laughter, and love. It was hard to believe they might never see it again. Lyra touched his arm. "We have to go, Jack," she said softly. He nodded, holding the door open for her. The cold morning air hit them like a wave. The sky was too bright for dawns. Something was burning in the distance. They moved quickly through the empty streets. Every sound made Jack's hand twitch toward his weapon. They passed homes with doors shut tight. Windows dark. Somewhere far away, a sharp crack echoed, too loud to be construction, too sharp to be anything but a weapon. Lyra tightened her grip on the baby. The child slept peacefully, unaware of the danger surrounding them when they reached the edge of the settlement. Jack stopped. Out there was the wild land, dense, alien forests, deep ravines, and predators, but he knew it was safer than staying. Behind them, somewhere in the quiet streets, the hunt had already begun. Jack took one last look at their home. He didn't know when they would return, or if they ever would. But one thing was certain: this was the day their lives changed forever, and the universe would never be the same. The alien forest was quiet in the early morning, but Jack didn't trust the silence. He walked ahead, scanning the path with sharp eyes, while Lyra followed close, cradling their newborn daughter. The child's small face peeked out from the folds of Lyra's coat. Peaceful and unaware, every few steps, Jack would glance up at the sky. At first, it seemed normal, just pale morning, light breaking through the mist, but then he saw them, shadows moving high above, shapes too large and too fast to be birds. They were alien ships, black and triangular, drifting like predators, circling prey. Lyra saw them too, and her steps quickened. "They found us already," she whispered. Jack tightened his grip on the strap of his pack. "How?" he asked, but he already knew the answer. Lyra didn't look at him, her voice low. "The moment she was born, her energy rippled through space. It's like a flare no one can hide." Jack didn't like the sound of that. It meant no matter where they went, those ships could follow. They entered a narrow path where the trees grew taller, their thick branches blocking most of the sky. It felt safer, but the tension in Jack's chest didn't ease. He could still hear the faint hum of the ships above. Every hum was like a heartbeat of danger. He remembered his training: never let the enemy dictate your moves. But here, they were already playing by someone else's rules. They walked for hours, stopping only when the baby needed feeding or rest. The air in the forest was damp, filled with the scent of alien flowers and moss. Strange insects buzzed nearby, some with wings that shimmered like glass. Jack kept his weapon close, his senses alert for anything moving too close. Finally, Lyra spoke again, her tone serious. "You need to know what they'll do if they catch us." Jack stopped walking, looking back at her. "They'll kill us?" he asked. Lyra shook her head. "They'll take her, and they'll use her to control entire star systems." Jack's jaw tightened. He thought of his daughter growing up as someone's tool, raised to be a weapon or a ruler without choice. "That's not happening," he said firmly. Lyra nodded, but her eyes showed sadness. "Then we have to stay." Ahead of them, always, by midday, the shadows in the sky grew thicker. Jack realized there were more ships now, dozens spreading across the horizon. They weren't attacking yet, but they were watching, tracking, waiting for the right moment. It was a tactic he knew well. They wanted to wear them down, make them desperate, and then strike. They found shelter under a rocky overhang hidden behind thick vines. Jack checked the area while Lyra sat with the baby. From there, he had a narrow view of the sky through the leaves. One of the ships hovered lower than the rest, its hull dark but lined with faint glowing symbols. "That one," Lyra said when she saw it. "That's from the Dominion." Jack didn't know much about alien politics, but he had heard the name. The Dominion was an empire built on fear, crushing every world they touched, if they were here. It meant things were worse than he thought. Jack sat beside her, speaking quietly. "You said there's another side, someone who might protect her." Lyra hesitated. "Yes, the Concord. But they'll only help if they believe she's truly the stellar heir." Jack frowned. "And if they don't?" Lyra's voice was cold. "They'll kill her to stop the prophecy from falling into the wrong hands." The thought made Jack's blood run cold. In this war, there was no true safe side. Only the lesser danger. He looked down at his daughter. So small, so fragile, and felt a surge of determination. No one would harm her while he lived. As the light began to fade, the forest changed. The sounds of day creatures vanished, replaced by the distant howls of night predators. Jack knew they couldn't travel in the dark with a newborn Nit was too dangerous. He set a small perimeter with motion sensors from his pack. Lyra held the baby close, humming softly in a strange alien tune. Jack listened, realizing it was a lullaby. For a moment, the war and the ships above felt far away. That peace shattered. When one of the sensors beeped, Jack moved instantly, checking the small screen. A heat signature large, moving fast, approaching from the north. Lyra's eyes widened. "Is it them?" Jack shook his head. "Not sure, but we're not waiting to find out." They packed quickly and moved deeper into the forest. The shadows above followed. Now more aggressive, their hum louder. Jack realized they weren't just tracking anymore. They were hurting them, pushing them toward something. He didn't like being forced into a direction, but with Lyra and the baby, he couldn't risk a direct fight. Finally, they broke through the trees into a wide clearing, and Jack froze. In the center stood a sleek silver craft, its design unlike the Black Dominion ships. It hovered silently, a ramp already extended. A tall alien figure in white armor waited. At the bottom, Lyra gasped. "Their Concord," she whispered. The figure raised a hand in greeting. But Jack didn't lower his weapon. If the Concord were here, it meant the galaxy's war for his daughter had just reached them both. And somewhere above, the shadows in the sky shifted, ready to strike. The silver Concord craft stood in the middle of the clearing, glowing faintly in the dim light. Jack kept his weapon raised, his body tense, every muscle ready to fire if needed. Lyra held the baby close, her breathing quick and shallow. The armored figure at the ramp didn't move. Closer. But his voice carried across the clearing. "We are here to protect the child," he said. "But you must come now." Jack didn't trust easy words. He glanced up at the dark shapes in the Sky Dominion ships, circling like vultures. "They've been on us since morning," Jack said. "What makes you different?" The Concord warrior stepped forward slowly, hands open to show no weapon. "Because if we leave you here," he replied, "they will take her tonight." Lyra touched Jack's arm, her eyes full of urgency. "They will attack soon," she whispered. "We can't fight them alone." Jack knew she was right. But every instinct screamed that stepping into an unknown ship was dangerous. He didn't get more time to decide. The hum of the Dominion ships above changed deeper, sharper. The sound of weapons powering up. A single beam of red light lanced through the trees, burning a trail in the dirt just meters away. "Go!" The Concord warrior shouted. Lyra ran for the ramp, clutching the baby. Jack backed toward the ship, firing at the sky. Bolts of blue plasma lit the air, one striking a tree and sending it crashing down in flames. The Dominion had begun there. Attack the moment Jack's boots hit the ramp. The Concord ship lifted off. The sudden rise sent his stomach lurching. He grabbed a railing, pulling Lyra close to shield her and the baby through the open ramp. He saw the forest below erupt in fire as the Dominion ships fired again. The clearing where they had stood was now nothing but smoke and ash. The ramp closed, sealing them inside. A clean white-lit interior. The Concord warrior removed his helmet, revealing pale skin and eyes like molten gold. "My name is Kalen," he said, "and you are now in the middle of a war." Jack didn't need the reminder. The ship shook violently as another blast hit its shields, alarms blared, and a voice over the intercom shouted, "Multiple hostiles in pursuit." Jack turned to Kalen. "Where are you taking us?" Kellen's jaw tightened. "To a safe point outside Dominion reach," he said. "But we must break their blockade first." The ship banked hard to the left. Jack stumbled, grabbing the wall. Lyra kept the baby pressed to her chest, murmuring soft words in her alien tongue to calm her. Outside the narrow window, Jack saw Dominion fighters swooping in, their black hulls cutting across the clouds. They moved in perfect formation, predators closing in on prey. "Strap in," Kalen ordered. Jack and Lyra took seats, securing the baby in Lyra's arms. Kalen moved to the front, where another pilot, slender, silver-skinned, was working controls with incredible speed. Bright blue shield energy flared around the craft. As enemy fire rained down, the ship shook again. This time harder. Jack could hear the faint hiss of heat on the outer hull. "Return fire," Kalen said, and the pilot's hands danced over glowing controls from beneath the Concorde craft. Bursts of white energy shot toward the Dominion fighters. One enemy ship exploded in a flash of red light, spiraling into the clouds below. But for each one they hit, two more seemed to appear. Lyra's voice was tight, urgent. "They will keep coming," she said. "They won't stop until she is in their hands." Jack looked down at his daughter's small, sleeping face. She didn't know she was the center of all this chaos. He swore silently that she would live to grow up far from this madness. A loud impact threw them sideways. The baby cried out, and Jack's heart slammed in his chest. Kalen turned sharply toward the pilot. "They've locked a tractor beam. Cut it." The pilot pulled hard on the controls, and the ship dove suddenly. The view outside spun into a blur of clouds and light. Jack's grip tightened on the seat as gravity pulled at him. For a moment, the stars appeared above again, and Jack thought they were clear. Then the largest Dominion ship yet emerged from the shadows of space. Its size was monstrous, dwarfing even the Concorde craft. Weapons ports glowed red along its sides. Kellen's face hardened. "They've sent a war cruiser." The pilot's voice was strained. "We can't outrun that." Kellen's gaze shifted to Jack. "Then we fight," he said simply. Jack didn't know if he was talking to him or to himself. The Concorde ship's guns roared to life, sending white-hot bursts toward the cruiser. The Dominion ship answered with a barrage of red plasma that shook their shields to the limit. Inside, the lights flickered, panels sparked, and the alarms screamed. The baby cried again, her voice high and frightened. Jack unclipped himself and moved to help steady Lyra. Kalen shouted something in his own language, and the pilot triggered a sudden jump sequence. Outside, the stars stretched and warped into lines of light. In a blink, the Dominion ships vanished. From sight, the alarms went silent, replaced by the low hum of the ship's engines in hyperspace. Jack sank back into his seat, breathing hard. Lyra stroked the baby's hair, murmuring that it was over for now. But Jack knew better. This was only the first attack. They had escaped. But the war for his daughter had truly begun, and next time, the Dominion wouldn't let them slip away so easily. The Concorde ship drifted in hyperspace, a steady hum filling the air. For the first time since the attack, there was no sound of weapons or alarms. Jack sat at a small metal table in the common area, his hands wrapped around a warm cup of something. The Concorde called Solon tea. It was bitter, but the heat helped clear his head. Across from him, Kalen studied a holographic map of the galaxy. Glowing lines showed Dominion-controlled sectors, Concorde territories, and neutral zones that weren't really safe for anyone. Lyra entered quietly, carrying the baby. The child was asleep again, her tiny head resting against her mother's chest. Jack couldn't help but feel a wave of relief every time he saw her safe. But he knew safety was only temporary. We can't keep running forever, Jack said, breaking the silence. Kalen looked up, his golden eyes sharp. Which is why we are not running, he said. We are meeting with allies. Jack raised an eyebrow. Allies? Out here? Kalen nodded, tapping the map. There is a resistance network, he explained. Humans, aliens, even defectors from the Dominion people who believe the prophecy is real and want to protect the stellar heir. Lyra frowned slightly. And how do we know they will not just try to take her for themselves? Kalen met her gaze. You don't, he admitted, but without help. You will not survive long enough to find out. Jack didn't like it, but he knew Kalen was right. A small ship like this could only dodge so many attacks if they were going to keep the baby alive. They would need supplies, safe houses, and maybe even soldiers willing to fight for her. He leaned back, staring at the shifting star lines outside the window. All right, he said. We meet them hours later. The ship dropped out of hyperspace into the orbit of a dusty, barren moon. On its surface was a sprawling settlement of metal domes and landing pads. From space, it looked abandoned. But as they descended, hidden lights flickered on, and ships emerged from camouflaged hangars. Jack felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. Places like this were never truly safe. Too many shadows, too many secrets. They landed in a dim hangar lit by strips of dull yellow light. Kalen led them down the ramp, his posture calm but alert. Several figures waited for them, some human, some alien. All armed at the front stood a tall man in worn armor, his face weathered and scarred. Kalen, he greeted with a curt nod. Didn't think you'd actually bring them. This is Commander Rourke, Kalen said to Jack. And Lyra, he runs this sector's resistance. Rourke's eyes flicked to the baby in Lyra's arms. So this is the child everyone's talking about, he said, his voice unreadable. Jack stepped closer to Lyra, his hand resting on his weapon without thinking. Rourke smirked slightly. Relax, human. I'm not here to steal your kid. They followed Rourke into a large meeting hall filled with maps, stations, and crates of supplies. Resistance fighters moved quickly through the room, passing data pads and checking weapons. This isn't just about your daughter, Rourke said, gesturing to the maps. If she is the stellar heir, the war is about to change, and everyone here is going to be a target. Jack didn't reply, but his mind was already calculating how many exits the room had. They spent hours discussing safe routes, possible hideouts, and who could be trusted. Some names were familiar to Lyra, old allies from her homeworld. Others were strangers to both of them. Finally, Rourke leaned back and said, You'll stay here for the night, get some rest. Then we'll arrange transport to a secure system. It should have been reassuring, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The settlement was too quiet, the guards too watchful. And more than once, he caught someone staring at the baby for a little too long that night. While Lyra and the baby slept in the small quarters they'd been given, Jack stayed awake. He sat in the dark, listening to the faint hum of machinery. And then he heard footsteps in the hall, moving too slowly to be casual. Jack slipped silently to the door and peered through the narrow gap. A shadow moved past one of the human guards they'd seen earlier, but he wasn't heading toward the meeting hall or the barracks. He was heading toward their quarters. Jack's hand tightened on his sidearm. When the guard reached the door, Jack stepped out, pressing the weapon to his neck. Going somewhere? Jack asked quietly. The man froze. I was just checking the perimeter, he stammered. Jack's eyes narrowed. Funny. Because the perimeter isn't in my room, the man's gaze flicked to the baby sleeping in the corner. That was all Jack needed to see before he could act. Another voice came from behind. Enough. Kalen stepped out of the shadows, his weapon drawn. "Drop it." He ordered the guard. The man hesitated, then let his blaster fall to the floor. Kellen's tone was cold. "Rourke will deal with you." The next morning, they learned the truth. The guard had been sending messages to a Dominion contact, offering the baby's location in exchange for safe passage and payment. Jack's stomach turned at the thought. Even here, among so-called allies, betrayal was only a heartbeat away. Rourke swore the traitor would be punished. But Jack's trust in the resistance was already cracked. He realized that from now on, every meeting, every handshake, and every promise would have to be treated as a possible trap. Lyra held the baby close, her expression hard. The prophecy draws both protectors and vultures, she said, and sometimes they wear the same face. Jack knew she was right. And he knew the next steps would be even more dangerous. The settlement was still. When the first alarm began to wail, a deep rising tone echoed through the metal corridors, making the walls tremble. Jack was already awake. Sitting at the edge of the cot with his boots on, Lyra stirred, clutching the baby tighter, her violet eyes wide with instinctive fear. Kalen burst into the room, his golden eyes sharp. "Vave. Found us," he said. "The Dominion fleet is here." Jack was on his feet instantly. "How many ships?" he demanded. Kellen's jaw was tight. "Too many," he said. "They've surrounded the moon. No one gets in or out." Rourke's voice crackled over the intercom, ordering all fighters to their stations. The steady hum of the base changed to the sharp roar of engines powering up. Outside, the hangars were alive with movement. Resistance pilots rushing to their ships. Every footstep pounded like a countdown to disaster. Jack followed Kalen through the narrow corridors toward the command hall. Lyra was right behind him, keeping the baby's head tucked beneath her coat. When they reached the observation deck, Jack saw the sky above the moon glowing red. Dominion ships blotted out the stars, their weapons glowing like molten fire. "They're not here to negotiate," Jack muttered. Kalen gave a grim nod. "No, they're here to take her." The first barrage hit moments later. The entire base shuddered as blasts tore into the outer dome. Metal groaned, lights flickered, and dust fell from the ceiling. Rourke stood at the center of the command hall, barking orders. "Shields, 2 full. Fire on my mark." Outside, resistance cannons roared, sending bursts of energy toward the black halls above. A Dominion ship exploded in a flash, but 2 more moved in to take its place. Lyra pressed close to Jack, her voice low and tense. "If the outer shields fail, they will breach the dome in minutes." Jack's eyes scanned the chaos around them. "Where's the safest place in this base?" he asked. Kalen shook his head. "There is no safe place during a siege." The next blast hit closer, throwing several fighters off their feet. Jack grabbed Lyra's arm to steady her. The baby whimpered, sensing the fear in the air. Rourke turned to Kalen, his voice sharp. "Get them to the lower tunnels now." Kalen didn't argue. He led them down a side corridor as the battle above raged on. The tunnels beneath the base were narrow and dim. The air was thick with the scent of fuel and scorched metal. Jack could still feel the vibrations of every blast through the floor. Above them, the battle was reaching its peak. The sound of cannon fire and collapsing metal echoed through the walls. Lyra kept her gaze forward, holding the baby close. Her calm voice whispered an alien lullaby. Trying to keep the child from crying, they reached a heavy blast door. Kalen keyed in a code, and it slid open with a grinding hiss. Inside was a reinforced chamber stocked with supplies and emergency power. "This will hold for a while," Kalen said. Jack stepped inside, but didn't sit down. "How long is a while?" Kalen didn't answer, and that told Jack everything. Suddenly, the lights flickered again. T's explosion shook the chamber so hard that one of the supply crates toppled over. Kalen pressed his earpiece, listening to a report. They've breached the first dome, he said. The outer defenses are falling. Jack's pulse quickened. If the Dominion broke through the second dome, they'd have direct access to the tunnels. And to the child, Rourke's voice came over the comm. Again, all units fall back to the central dome. Kellen's expression turned grim. They're pushing us into the heart of the base. Jack understood the tactic. It meant the Dominion was closing in fast from all sides. A loud crash echoed. Down the tunnel outside, Jack raised his weapon, moving toward the door. Then the blast came metal, tearing apart as an explosive charge ripped the tunnel open. Through the smoke, dark armored shapes emerged. Dominion soldiers, their red visors glowing in the dim light. Jack fired, the sharp crack of his weapon mixing with the deep hum of alien rifles. Kalen joined him, his shots precise, dropping 2 soldiers instantly. Lyra stayed in the corner, shielding the baby with her own body. The chamber filled with smoke, the air hot and choking. Jack could feel the floor shaking beneath them again. This time from footsteps. More soldiers were coming. Fall back. Kalen shouted. They moved quickly into another tunnel. The sounds of pursuit close behind. Jack fired over his shoulder, hitting one soldier square in the chest, but there were too many. Kalen slammed a door shut behind them and locked it. Buying them seconds, this way, he called, leading them up a narrow maintenance ladder. They emerged in a side hangar where a small shuttle sat ready. Rourke was already there, wounded but still standing. Get them out, he shouted to Kalen. Jack hesitated. What about you? Rourke gave a half smile. Someone's got to hold them off. The blast door to the hangar shook violently as Dominion troops tried to break through. Kalen started the shuttles. Engines. Lyra climbed aboard, Jack right behind her. The baby was crying now. The noise almost drowned out by the roar of the engines. The hangar door opened to the blackness of space. Jack saw flashes of battle outside. Resistance ships falling, Dominion fighters swarming. The shuttle lifted just as the hangar behind them exploded. Jack held on to Lyra, shielding both her and the baby. The ship shot forward into the chaos, weaving through enemy fire, and behind them, the base that had been their shelter was now a burning ruin. They had survived the siege, but Jack knew survival had come at a cost. The resistance was broken, their allies scattered, and now the Dominion would hunt them harder than ever. The shuttle's interior was dim, lit only by the glow of the control panels. Jack sat strapped into a seat near the back, holding his breath as the stars drifted past a narrow window. Lyra sat across from him, the baby wrapped in a thick blanket, her small face barely visible. Kalen was at the controls, his focus locked on the readings. Every so often, his golden eyes flicked to the sensors as if expecting an enemy ship to appear. They had been flying in silence for almost an hour since escaping the siege. The battle at the moon had cost them allies, weapons, and safe ground. Now they were drifting in open space, every direction as dangerous as the last. Jack finally broke the silence. So what now? Kalen didn't look back. There is one option, he said, his tone heavy, but it will be the hardest choice you ever make. Lyra shifted slightly, her eyes narrowing. What choice? She asked, her voice low. Kalen hesitated, as if weighing the right words. There is a sanctuary, he said, hidden deep within the Veil Nebula, guarded by the Concord. Far from Dominion reach. Jack leaned forward, and Kellen's hands tightened on the controls. They will take her in, raise her in secret until she is strong enough to defend herself, until she can fulfill or reject the prophecy on her own terms. Lyra's gaze dropped to the baby, and Kellen's voice was steady. You would not be allowed to stay. Jack's chest tightened instantly. You're saying we hand her over to strangers and just walk away? Kalen didn't flinch. I am saying you give her a chance to live, The words hung heavy in the small cabin. Lyra's eyes shimmered, her voice trembling but firm. If she stays with us, they will never stop hunting her. She will grow up. Running, hiding, and one day, they will catch us. Jack shook his head. I can protect her. Lyra reached for his hand. You already have, more times than I can count. But this is bigger than us. For a long time, Jack said nothing. The hum of the engines filled the silence. He looked at his daughter's tiny face. Peaceful in sleep, every instinct told him to keep her close, to never let her out of his sight. But another voice, quieter, harder to hear, told him Lyra was right. One day, their luck would run out. And when it did, the Dominion would take everything. Kalen set the course without waiting for their answer. I will take you to the sanctuary. He said, decide before we arrive. The journey through the Veil Nebula took 2 days. The view outside was breathtaking, vast clouds of blue and violet gas. Scattered with shimmering starlight, it should have been beautiful. But for Jack, it felt like a slow walk toward an ending he didn't want. He barely slept, staying awake to watch over Lyra and the baby. Even in quiet moments, the thought of leaving her made his chest ache. On the second day, Kalen called them to the cockpit. There, he said, pointing to the screen. Through the swirling clouds, a massive structure emerged. It wasn't like any station Jack had seen. It was built into the heart of a colossal asteroid. Shielded by layers of glowing energy, ships patrolled its perimeter. Sleek and fast, there. Holes marked with the silver and white insignia of the Concorde as they approached. A voice crackled over the comm. Identify and state your purpose. Kalen replied smoothly. Escort for priority subject Stellar Air. There was a pause. Then the voice returned. Permission granted. Dock at Bay 7. Jack's pulse quickened. This was at the point where choice became action. The shuttle slid into a vast hangar. The air filled with the hum of machinery and the sound of boots on metal, waiting for them were half a dozen Concorde guards and a tall woman in ceremonial armor. Her eyes were the same molten gold as Kellen's. She stepped forward and bowed slightly. I am High Warden Cerise, guardian of the sanctuary, she said, her voice calm but commanding. Her gaze moved to the baby in Lyra's arms. She will be safe here, Cerise said. She will be taught, protected, and hidden until the time comes for her to choose her path. Jack felt the words sink like stones in his chest. He looked at Lyra, who was already looking at him. Neither spoke, but both knew the decision had to be made now. Jack turned back to Cerise. What if we say no? Cerise didn't blink. Then you will leave. And every day you remain free will be a miracle. Silence stretched between them. Lyra kissed the baby's forehead. Whispering something in her own language, she then placed her hand gently on Jack's. We promised to give her the best life we could, she said softly. This is it. Jack's throat tightened. He stepped forward slowly, every muscle screaming to turn back. When Cerise reached out, Jack hesitated. Holding the baby one last time, he memorized her warmth, her scent, the way her tiny fingers curled around his thumb. Then, with a deep breath, he placed her in Cerise's arms. It felt like the air had been punched out of him. Lyra's eyes glistened, but she didn't. Creasy stood tall. Ceres bowed again. She is safe, she said. You may go. As Kalen led them back to the shuttle, Jack didn't look back. He couldn't, because if he did, he might never leave. The shuttle lifted from the sanctuary hangar in silence. Jack sat by the window, watching the massive asteroid fortress fade into the swirling light of the Veil Nebula. His hands were clenched into fists, his knuckles white. Beside him, Lyra sat stiffly, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Neither of them spoke. Every word they might have said felt too heavy, too dangerous to let out. Kalen piloted the shuttle into the thick clouds of the nebula. The swirling blue and violet light painted the interior in shifting colors. It should have been beautiful, but Jack barely noticed. His mind was still in that hangar, still holding the weight of his daughter, still hearing the soft sound of her breathing against his chest. They were halfway to the nebula's edge when the first warning alarm blared. Kellen's hands flew over the controls. Multiple contacts, he said sharply. Jack leaned forward. Dominion? Kellen's golden eyes narrowed. Yes, and more than a patrol. They've brought a fleet. The stars ahead flickered as black shapes emerged from hyperspace. Massive Dominion warships spread out in formation, their weapons already glowing with power. Jack's pulse pounded in his ears. They tracked us? Lyra's voice was cold. They tracked us, Sor, someone told them. Kellen's jaw tightened. They can't breach the sanctuary's shields, but they can destroy us before we reach Concord space. The cum crackled, and a cold mechanical voice filled the cabin. Deliver the child, or be destroyed. Jack's fists clenched. She's not even with us, he muttered. But he knew the Dominion wouldn't believe them or care. The first barrage came without warning. Red plasma bolts streaked toward the shuttle, shaking it violently on impact. Jack grabbed the seat to steady himself. Kalen pulled the shuttle into a sharp dive, weaving between the blasts. Hold on, he shouted. Lyra gripped the seat with one arm and held on to Jack with the other. The shuttle roared forward, engines straining. Then, from behind, a flash of silver tore through the nebula clouds. A Concord warship emerged, sleek and bright against the darkness. Its cannons lit up, firing bursts of white energy into the Dominion line. Kellen's voice was tense but steady. They sent an escort. They must have detected the fleet. More Concord ships jumped in, the space around them filling with streaks of light as reinforcements arrived. The Dominion answered with even more firepower. The sky became a storm of energy, ships twisting and exploding in every direction. Jack's gut told him this wasn't a rescue. This was the first real battle of something far bigger. Get to the weapons console. Kalen barked. Jack didn't hesitate. He strapped into the gunner's seat. Gripping the controls, the targeting display lit up with enemy ships. He locked onto the closest fighter and fired. A burst of energy cut through its hull, sending it spinning into the nebula's mist. Lyra moved to the second console. Taking control of the aft guns, her hands were steady, her eyes sharp. Jack glanced at her between shots and felt a flicker of pride. She wasn't just a mother protecting her child. She was a warrior. Their combined fire took down 2 more Dominion fighters. But for every one they destroyed, 3 more appeared. The Concord fleet began to push forward, creating a corridor for the shuttle to escape. Kalen seized the chance. Throwing the shuttle into a sharp climb, the G-forces pressed Jack back into his seat. Outside, the battle raged on flashes of light, shattered ships, and the endless hum of weapons. Through it all, Jack's mind kept returning to one thought. This was just the beginning. As they neared the edge of the battle, a massive Dominion cruiser moved to block their path. Its shadow covered them completely. Kalen cursed under his breath. They're trying to cut us off from hyperspace. Jack fired again and again, but the cruiser's shields absorbed the blasts like water. On stone, the ship's weapons locked onto them. This is it, Jack thought. But then a blinding beam of white light sliced through the cruiser's midsection. The massive ship split apart, flames spilling into the void. Jack turned to see the Sorsa Concord dreadnought, easily twice the cruiser's size, charging. Through the debris, the path ahead was suddenly clear. Punch it, Jack shouted. Kalen hit the controls, and the shuttle surged forward, engines howling. The stars stretched into lines as they jumped into hyperspace. Leaving the battle behind, silence filled the cabin again. But it wasn't the peaceful kind. Jack stared at the streaking lights outside, knowing the war had officially started. The Dominion wouldn't stop. The Concord wouldn't stop. And somewhere in the sanctuary, his daughter was now the most valuable and most dangerous being in the galaxy. Lyra leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes. They will come for her again, she said quietly. Jack reached over, taking her hand. Then we'll be ready, he replied. His voice was steady, but inside, he knew readiness wasn't enough. They would need allies, ships, and every ounce of strength they could find. Kalen glanced back at them. You've both made your choice, he said. Now you must live with it. And fight for it? Jack nodded slowly. The baby was safe for now. But as the shuttle raced toward Concord space, he could almost feel the weight of the galaxy shifting. The war for her future had begun, and he and Lyra were right in the middle of it.